Welcome to UberCube, the podcast we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka Uberbear, and today I'm joined by my other two lovely hosts. Let's start out with the one that I just defined there as lovely. The other one's he's present.
Stu, how about you introduce yourself?
I am nice. Lovely, actually. Hi, this is Stu. How you all doing? Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Don't
You're
worry,
welcome.
Stu. I got your back.
Mwah.
I got you.
Thank you.
Hearts.
And let's
Hi,
go over
I'm
to
May.
the loveliest
Magic.
of hosts. Yes, our loveliest hosts.
So we've got a very interesting episode to discuss with you today. In the preparation for our event, which I'll talk about here momentarily, have been needling through all of my cubes, just tweaking them, ensuring that they are, I guess, present and accounted for and that they meet the expectations. Because hi, my name's Anthony, and I own 8 cubes.
Hi, Anthony.
There you go. Yes. So sometimes what happens whenever you have that type of, cube volume, it's easy for some of them to get a little dusty, a little rusty. So in this case, I've been focusing, I talked about this recently. We had all this preparation for CubeCon 2023. I wanted to make sure that Uber's Artifact Cube as well as the Horror Cube were up to snuff and that the people would have the most optimal fun with it. I focused on foiling them out, blinging them out, so that your retinas would burn while playing my cubes.
That's getting expensive now, hey?
It is, in fact, an expensive hobby. One of my little jokes that you have, if you ever check out Uberbear's overview or my profile, you'll see one day my wife will sell all my cubes based on the little white lies that I've told her over the years that I actually spent for them in a garage sale.
I will offer her based on the
those estate sales?
the lies that you have told her as far as your cube value.
Those estate sales where you just show up and you're like, my son used to play this game back in 1993.
That's right.
I don't really care about these anymore. They've been sitting in the attic. How about, what do you think, $5? And the guy nods and goes, $5. That sounds good.
Tree fitting, baby. I need that tree fitting.
So as a result of all the preparation and getting ready for that, I realized that my powered vintage cube has definitely become a little rusty. It's not that I have been trying to keep up the Joneses and modifying it and updating it, but some of the archetypes and stuff had definitely went a little bit out of date. Stu and I really have been talking about this a lot lately. That's just some of the cards simply weren't impactful any longer. They weren't doing anything. They didn't resonate.
Yeah, and it's not confined to a particular time period either. We're definitely seeing this period now where cards that I think a few years ago would have been considered absolute staples, borderline untouchable, are now just simply falling out of favor. The power level has increased significantly, and we're now at this stage where, again, those cards that would have just seemed almost untouchable some years ago are now at that point where they're being cut because of power creep and, various reasons, synergy, etc. So I think this has been a great exercise for me because I'm a huge Vintage Cube fan, right? I love playing Vintage Cube. So to see you as a curator as well sort of develop a new attitude and a new mindset towards your cube as well has been particularly fascinating. And today we're going to talk about some of those changes.
Yeah, but one thing that we're going to talk about is the reason why I'm doing all this preparation. On April the 27th, I have been blowing up the socials, but UberCube is hosting an event at an LGS. It's the Gathering Place, April 27th at 9 a.m. until essentially close. On that particular Saturday, we're doing a cube extravaganza where we're going to have 64 players and 8 cubes. And essentially it'll be 8 pods of 8, and then it'll distill down to the top 4 will move forward, and then the top 2 will move forward to become the top 8, which will play my powered vintage cube. And that's the reason why we're talking about this cube is I'm got till April to get this thing nice and shiny and squeaky. So we would love, love, love to see you guys show up, all the listeners. Even if it's above the 64, there'll be side events, there'll be raffles. The LGS, the Gathering Place, is phenomenal, as in they take care of their drafters. The fee of entry is currently $55, which includes a drink ticket because they have a bar, Stu. They have a bar. It's
They
sweet.
do, and I appreciate that.
It makes me just monitoring all my drafts all day go a lot smoother whenever they call judge. I'm like, I got this. But before we go any further down this conversation, we're going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube, and we're going to enjoy our libations of the show. Let's start with May. What are you having on this delightful evening?
So I'm actually going relatively basic this time. I'm actually sipping some pumpkin spice coffee.
Ooh. My wife has been making her own, like the pumpkin filler. And
Really?
yeah, because this, like, she was always a PSL pumpkin spice latte fan from Starbucks, but those things are outrageously expensive. So she gets like
definitely.
the can of the pumpkin mix and mixes up her own like pumpkin flavor thing that she sticks in there and mixes up in the coffee, and she's like, it's even better than the Starbucks.
I'm going to gatekeep coffee
yeah,
now.
I
I'm
can
a coffee
imagine that's
purist. You
even
guys are
better.
grossing me out. You don't put nothing in coffee.
I don't
Coffee
drink
is coffee. Don't mess with coffee.
You're a pumpkin.
You don't put no melons.
You're a coffee what? Elitist?
Melons. Yes, I am.
Coffee gatekeeper?
Coffee gatekeeper. That's me. Get out of the way, Starbucks. I know what I'm doing. I am having, as soon as I get a bottle opener from my good friend Stu here, a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which I love supporting Sierra Nevada. It's one of the few holdouts that has stayed independent. Let's go ahead and crack them open, and let's get to the topic.
Yeah, I'm going to crack open my wicked weed freak of nature.
Yeah, that fits you. That's good personality
Thank
definition.
you. I appreciate that.
So, let's start with the good news. This is a shout out to ChillMTG. Check out his channel. I have news. He'll enjoy this as a listener. I cut bribery. Bribery's gone.
I'm very excited about
A lot
that.
of people, everybody go,
It's one of those cards that I think, from a raw power level perspective, really should be in the cube, right? It's a bonkers powerful card. It's also the card that when I've had a couple of beverages and I've had this card played against me, like Chill did twice in a game where I was playing a deck. I don't know if it might have been a reanimate deck or something like that. And I just stormed off and was like, I hate this card. So I'm, from a raw power level perspective, sure, it should be in there. From a fun perspective,
it's miserable.
It's no good.
So the
like
card, for those that aren't familiar with bribery, is for 2 blue and 3 colorless. You get a sorcery. Am I correct in all
2
this?
blue, 3 colorless.
And you get to search target player's library or opponent's library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into play.
Gross.
It's gross.
Gross.
It gives you
So
full
gross.
deck information. It just ruins games of Magic. And it's one of those cards that, interestingly enough, we talked about this before. Not only have you just rifled through their entire library, you've seen most of their strategy, kind of ruining the fun factor and the secrecy of what makes Magic so interesting anyways, right?
Yep.
But now you're going to take their best card, and then you create this interesting dynamic, not so interesting, where now they're going to sideboard and basically fracture down and destroy their card. We've talked about this jokingly, whether or not a game of poker or mental chess happens, or whether or not you pretend like you're taking out your key cards that they searched out. But the person's probably going to keep bribery and try to do it again. So ultimately, even though powered vintage cube 540 screams creme de la creme, most powerful Magic ever made since 1993, there's a point where, May, what are you always trying to find? What's
The fun.
The fun. And if you're running a card that just, I guess, detracts from the fun, ultimately.
There's always the fun is a zero-sum game
It
argument.
is.
And you know what? I will say, I've cast bribery on my opponents, and I've been able to look through their deck, and I've been able to steal their best creature. And I was doing that with a great big smile on my face. And maybe that's just I don't know what to say, childish, but maybe it's just what's good for me is not
Fun
good
for me,
thee.
but
Fun
not
for
for
me.
thee.
Yeah, exactly. Like I and at the time, I remember when I first, Vintage Cube was a newer thing to me, and I thought, wow, this card is really amazing. Like, I just get to go and steal any card that I want. And I did it, and you kind of see that look on your opponent's face, like, really? Really? You're going to do that to me? Really?
Yeah.
And then it happened to me a bunch of times, and I was like, yeah, no.
It's ultimately
So
kind of
I'm
a cheesy
actually
way.
going to mention the part that I think is important about bribery, and when it comes to its inclusion for Cube, and that's it makes games take longer because players who aren't as comfortable or as well versed with vintage environments, or maybe players who are just not as skilled at Magic in general, are just going to take longer trying to go through their opponent's decks to figure out what things they're supposed to remove. It can make games take longer for that reason.
Take the 15 mana Eldrazi. if in doubt.
And that's what you're leaning in on. But sometimes if they're running like a bunch of utility creatures or whatever, it suddenly becomes devalued. So it's such an odd duck card anyways. So for the interim, probably for the long term, I've chosen as a curator to remove it in preparation for this event that we're doing in April. So I just think it's the better outcome. Would you agree, Stu?
I would agree.
Yeah, so what we're going to talk about is kind of in a non-Wooberg order is the changelog. We're going to kind of go through that as a team, and then we're going to look at the individual list, and we definitely have some cards that I know and I acknowledge are a little rusty, but I've been trying to cut through this, and anybody that owns a Power Vintage Cube, and I do specifically own these cards, this is very... It's 95%. I don't have the Power 9 in here. I don't have that because, whatever.
Well, they're in there.
They're in there, but my point is...
But they're not in there.
The point is that keeping up this type of list when it's not in a digital format and real card can be beyond expensive.
Yes, it can.
So unrealistic to change this on a regular basis, right? Every time a new set comes out, it's very difficult. This is why, May, I love cards like the Fey Cube, right? Or a Pauper Cube where a new set comes out and it's Christmas for you, right? Like you see something and you're like, what, $2? If you want to foil 4?
Yeah, it's usually not bad at all.
Yeah, it's not restrictive, right? And so I did this to myself. There's a certain amount of, so that's got a lot to do with how frequent these cubes get updated too. Yeah. I think that's something that
there are cards in your vintage cube that are probably worth as much as the cheapest version of the fake cube.
Yeah.
By the way, don't tell my wife. This goes back to the garage sale someday, right? They had a estate sale. All these people listening right now, come looking for
I'm gonna send
Anthony
her a
Adams
link.
someday.
I'm going to send her a link to this episode. Your secret is out.
Let's hit this first card in the change list. Let's talk about this.
So I think we can kind of group these a little bit together, right? So the first one we'll talk about is Restless Vents. Yeah, so Restless Vents was an LCI edition. It's a manland, black, taps for black, red, until end of turn becomes a 2/3 black and red insect creature token with menace. And when it attacks, you may discard and then draw. There's a few of these in that LCI set, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and in my opinion, this is the best one. I'd say you could probably argue between this and the Beanstalk.
Yeah.
But this is such
the
a
Beanstalk
logical...
was from the previous set, and I actually have that in here too, but it's sick.
Yeah.
Manlands are an odd duck, right? Because not all manlands are created equally. Like, they're not all power adjacent, which is interesting. I actually ordered all of them from this set because they were affordable, and they will find their way into other cubes or other formats, right? But the Restless Vents, just because of that ability to essentially loot, is so powerful because Rakdos wants to do that. And the change log, I cut that over something like Haunted Ridge, which was kind of one of those slow lands when it enters the battlefield. It's a check land to see if you have 2 or more, which is a fantastic card because Rakdos typically in these type of environments, or at least in mine, has this need for speed.
Yes.
It's about powering through, which I've kind of changed that a little bit, but in the iteration previously, it was about the black aggro, which is no longer. We've talked about that in a previous episode.
Yeah. I like the control 2 or less. I think 2 or more, now it's a little bit clunky, a little bit more awkward.
I do run it in my horror cube. So what's interesting, we've talked about this before, which this is Christmas for all of my other cubes. That's what's fascinating me. Is every time I cut like a foil from my Power Vintage Cube, and a lot of times it's either goes to a binder, but the vast majority of these go, well, I've got a Glenalandra in this cube and I don't have a foil of it. Well, Power Vintage Cube's no longer running it. I'm going to transition it over. So it's Christmas for my other cubes in so many words. It's interesting. You can do that as a curator if you have multiple cubes.
I like it. So this next one is an interesting to me. So Ash Barrens has been taken out for Lotus Field. So Lotus Field is a hexproof, enters the battlefield tapped. When it ETBs, you sack 2 lands, and it adds 3 mana of any one color. I think this land is bonkers. It 100% belongs in the cube, but I actually quite like Ash Barrens. I think a 1 mana cycle for any basic land, which Ash Barrens does, that's pretty decent fixing for a 4 or 5 color deck.
And May, you'll appreciate this. The reason why Ash Barrens is no longer in here is because the new creatures that came out that had the cycle for 1 basic land that bend themselves have kind of... Ash Barrens is still very functional, but those new cards that have come out, such as the Troll of Khazad-dûm and those type cards, right? They've come in where they'll actually go get my duels or anything that signals actually a
Well,
land type.
obviously, Troll of Khazad-dûm is swamp cycling, so you have to get a swamp, right?
Yeah, and I run
And then the
3
red
of
one,
that
you have to go
subset,
get.
yeah.
Oh yeah, they're they're bonkers for other reasons as well. Ash Barons is very good, in my opinion, because you can go and get any basic. I think it's a great card.
It may find its way back in.
I can see the argument of wanting to replace land for land and not wanting to replace, obviously fetches, duels, so on and so forth. But I think Lotus Field obviously is bonkers and should absolutely be in the cube.
Yeah, after examining May, what do you think about that swap?
No, I love Lotus Field, but I also agree with Stu is that Ash Barons, sometimes when it comes to your environment, having consistency is better than having redundancy, and increases your cube's consistency, and Ash Barons is redundant in a very useful way. So I could see it coming back.
Yeah.
So it may find its way back, because as Stu and I have reviewed the cube even further, looking at the list, which I'll share in the show notes, there is definitely an opportunity to seed it back in, because I have some cards that I believe are starting to, again, they're getting a little dusty, a little rusty, right?
Well, here's the next one. I think is a great example.
The next card we want to talk about that's on that list.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The next swap that you have is you finally took out Siege Gang Commander for Underworld Breach.
I like you say finally.
It hurts my feelings to even say it out loud.
I know. I love me some Siege Gang Commander, but it is not the beast that it used to be. Like, it is still a fantastic card. It'll put in a lot of work. But my question for you is, do you think that Underworld Breach has enough of an impact with, say, whatever combo cards are in your environment that it'll start being more relevant than Siege Gang was just generically good?
Yes.
Yeah, the reason why is Siege Gang Commander, for 3 colorless and 2 red, you get a 2/2 creature goblin. Whenever Siege Gang Commander enters the battlefield, create 3 1/1 goblin creature tokens, and you can pay 1 colorless and 1 mountain, sacrifice a goblin. Siege Gang Commander deals 2 damage to any target. Very powerful effect once you've got it to stick. But it also competes with stuff like Tubby Dragon and all these other fast dragons, right? That 5 mana slot, it mostly comes down to the mana value in my mind, less than the impact of the game. But by the time this comes down, I've seen people turn games around with Siege King Commander. There's stuff where you can actually play this for 5 mana, and with all the fast mana that you have in these environments, you can get down, you can change games. This is a perfectly serviceable Magic card. It could still exist in this environment harmoniously. But when we go back to Underworld Breach, I had to make some choice decisions on cuts because I integrated Storm into this environment. We're going to talk about Storm. Yep. I know. This is what everybody's been. This is the crescendo. Storm has been something that I would say approximately 8 years ago, I tested a Storm package, and it did not play well at 540. And we have talked about our buddy Chris, aka Samich, now runs it in his 450, and it runs so smoothly because of the cards that enable Storm have become so modernized. The tech is better, that it just is more impactful than it was 8 years ago. Right? I was running cards that just got Empty the Warrens and stuff like that, which I still could service those cards.
I remember when Empty the Warrens was a legitimate reason to run a Storm package and a great win con. And who knows, maybe there's still a future out there for Empty the Warrens.
It could work with something like Goblin Bombardment. Trust me, it takes every fiber of my being not to add Chatterstorm to this cube. Right?
What? Are you too good for Crowstorm?
I would run Crowstorm in a heartbeat. You don't even threaten.
Don't threaten Anthony.
Yeah, don't give me good ideas. Don't threaten me with a good time because I'll do it. But Underworld Breach actually chains off with an LED combo.
Yes,
so you can
LED,
actually brain freeze.
Yeah.
So in order to enable it, I had to make some decisions.
We should actually jump the script a little bit and actually talk about getting LED in instead of Tanglewire.
Yeah. So Tanglewire, let's talk about why that's cut. And for the people that aren't familiar, Tanglewire, for 3 colorless, you get an artifact, Fading 4. At the beginning of Fading 4 is over time, it just loses the counter. For those that aren't familiar, it's an older Magic card. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player taps an untapped artifact, creature, or land that they control for each fade counter on Tanglewire. An excellent control lockdown mechanism. Yeah, so the ultimate reason why I cut this card, and this is another one that might find its way back in because it's serviceable standalone, is because I cut the Stacks package recently. Because braids and things like that were simply getting, again, because of tech that has come out as of lately in the last 3 years, is that I noticed that the Stacks package, which is, I'm a absolute proponent for stacks. I think it's not fun. I'm not going to argue that it's fun. I'm going to say that it's oppressive, but it's an interesting dynamic to have in the cube, kind of that whole hate bears type of idea. But stacks has definitely started to dwindle in its power level. It's kind of like the comparison or the analog that I would make is like trying to run aristocrats in this package, which I did try at one point, where it's simply the incremental damage could not keep up. The same thing happened with stacks, is that these other archetypes are simply too fast, too furious for my stacks package to have kept up. And I love braids. Like, I got a little tear in my eye cutting braids, but when I cut braids, it started this cataclysmic spiral of cutting the other components, and there was a bunch more over time that's not in the present list that just started dying. And this was the last of that holdout. Well, I would say that Winter Orb is still in here for different reasons, but it just over time, I think these cards have started to wane on me a little bit.
I like Winter Orb. I think it has a place if you're drafting maybe like an Urza style artifact deck,
which is still there.
Yeah, obviously. So yeah, I like this. I like me a stacks package, but I just think there's too many other fun things to be doing, especially with braids specifically. With 4 mana, if I'm playing black, I want to play Sheoldred. I don't want to play,
it's cards like that have
those kind of cards
out.
have kind of, in my opinion, pushed out. Very different strategically, but I just think from a power level / the CMC that it's at, it just doesn't have the same luster that it used to.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate, it's so interesting with these cubes is if you're a curator and you're listening to this right now and you're thinking that I'm going out to the burn pit right now and throwing these in the 55-gallon drum, I'm not. These cards, over time, it's so fascinating how cards will reintroduce themselves over time. Like in 4 years, something will happen. Something will get printed that will awaken all these again. It's happened over and over again where I say this card's not very good anymore, but then a functional use comes back online. Yeah. So my advice to you as a curator is don't just immediately sell these cards, put them in a binder or put them in another cube or loan them to one of your buddies so they can build a cube. But then just understand that eventually these cards will come back into favor over time.
So a couple of them we'll go over a little quicker. We don't need to run through this list and every explanation because I think a lot of these choices make a lot of sense. So Disenchant for Seasoned Dungeoneer. Recent episode we had was about Anthony has just discovered Initiative.
Yep.
Fell in love with it. Obviously, Seasoned Dungeoneer, cards of the ilk that provide Initiative, incredibly powerful cards. All of them should go in there.
Initiative's great. Like ever since I discovered Initiative, like my family life has gotten better. I've lost like 15 pounds.
You haven't.
I've been.
I won't believe either of those things.
Suddenly, I'm just excelling in my career.
Maybe your hair's not growing as quick as it was, but those are the two.
Yeah, we talked about Anthony Scott's Initiative. So whenever I was cutting cards, it's just some of these cards like Disenchant. I've got Nature's Chant in there, and these are 2 cards that I'm in love with, and I've got the beautiful. This is a problem that people have talked about a lot of times. Is you either get that signed foil or that judge foil over time that you're in love with, and these cards will stick longer. And I want to use this Disenchant, even though he wanted to go over it like a speed bump. It's because I had like the DCI, the beautiful art of it that I thought was absolutely gorgeous. And it's a functional card, but White Plume Adventure and stuff like that just needed a spot.
Yeah, White Plume and Season. So Sun Titan, again, it's just one of those cards. It's a fine card, but it's 6 mana. It's pretty expensive. It's just not as impactful as it used to be. This used to be a very good top end for any kind of white, especially aggro-y kind of deck. It just doesn't. I want to
argue the logic sometimes behind these cards and why they lasted longer, because I think that has value and substance, right? This isn't the episode of we just cut this card and this card's better. Like sometimes people need to understand the substance or into the mind of the curator. I would say that the reason why Sun Titan hung on at the 6 mana that we talked about for a couple of reasons. One is because it tethered so nicely at the time with my Lands Matters package because it could get back all the fetches and stuff like that I was doing, and it chains off really well with Black Lotus. There's some holdout reasons as to why this card would exist. So if you're still running it, feel free to run it. We're not the arbiters of what is right in Cube.
No.
It's just in this case, I just wanted to kind of bring my mana value curve down a little bit.
Agreed.
Right?
I think sometimes you're making those decisions for raw power, right? And sometimes you're making it for fun. And there's a balance between the two, but I think Sun Titan for White Plume just makes
this
so much
next
sense.
one I want to talk about.
Wildfire?
This is a big package change.
Wildfire.
Yeah. There's an episode we did
gone.
on Wildfire. I cut Wildfire and Burning of Zain, which hurt my heart so bad. And these are both, if you're not familiar, the gist is they blow up 4 lands and do 4 damage to each creature. The idea is that you power out a bunch of signets or talisman. You basically get mana rock superiority, and then you just blow up the board, basically like an Armageddon style in so many words, right? And then you have dominance. It's kind of like the pseudo equivalent of an upheaval, if I had to do an analog, or some kind of Armageddon effect where you planned for it, right?
Yeah.
It was really hard for me. That goes back to my stacks where I cut stacks. These were not easy packages to cut. As in, I enjoy both of these. But simply based on the release rate that Wizard is doing, and which I enjoy, like I like new tech, these cards just were not keeping up at the price rate they were costing. Both of these cost 6 mana.
It's expensive.
It's expensive. So you had to really get in there so fast with the fast mana, power it out, and then hope to get ahead of your opponent and hope that you can get above 4 so you have board dominance. We talked about this in our Wildfire episode where the new tech of the time, May, you'll like this, was Minx and Boo. Just because
Minx and Boo.
Minx and Boo, because I like hamsters, right?
What an absurd card.
And so it was just cool tech to be able to power out Wildfire and blow it up. The reality of it is over time, I just had to accept this, the spoonful of sugar, and that these cards will go in a binder. They're just not doing what they once did.
Seething Song is an interesting ad. I will say that I like this card. I don't know if the red rituals aren't at the power level I don't think that they used to be. Obviously, things like Dark Ritual is unbelievable. For me, I think Seething Song, maybe it's getting close.
It's okay. I mean, I didn't mind Seething Song for 2 colors and 1 red. You get an instant. Add 5 red to your mana pool.
It's pretty good.
I didn't feel bad about adding this because I still run like the Kiki combo. You could power out Kiki Jiki for 3. I mean, if you're not even storming off here, right? Like there's things to be done with this. So this card didn't feel wrong to me.
Look at Namesticker Goblin. That's a new one that's come out, right? That's a dice roll. It comes out, you can roll a dice and you've basically got a 1/3 chance to either get 4 mana or 5 mana or 6 mana, all red. That's a good card. That's seeing a lot of play, and for a good reason. You get that out early, it gives you a chance to power something out. I like that card. Seething Song is a fine card.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and cut the Storm package, keep Seething Song, and then I'll just power out
more red cards.
Siege Gang Commander, I think.
There you go. Turn 3 Siege Gang.
I do agree that Wildfire was a good cut here because as much as people kind of fall in love with the Wildfire package, it's just not that relevant, I believe.
No. It's not very fun either.
I held on forever.
It's cute, but it just destroys your opponent's fun. It's just not relevant enough.
Yeah, I don't think it's very good.
So the next one that was a hard cut, you want to take this one on?
So this is Bye Bye Hornet Queen and Hello Gruff Triplets. 3 colors, 3 green.
Easy upgrade.
Satyr Warrior. 3/3 trample. When it ETBs, if it isn't a token, you create 2 tokens that are copies of it. And then when it dies, you put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to its power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplets.
This card with Flash is insane, which I've added to this cube as well.
Yes.
Now Stu is nodding his head.
No,
Gruff Triplets is just really good.
I like this card.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's okay. Do I love it?
It's okay.
Probably not.
It's better than Hornet Queen, I think.
I see it in a lot of other cubes, right? You're not the only one running this in their vintage cube list. I don't really like this card that much. I'm just going to put that out there.
So, I think the reason I like Gruff Triplets more than I like Hornet Queen is that Hornet Queen is better when it comes to resource and time-dependent formats, while Gruff Triplets is a lot more proactive.
Yes.
It comes in, it is a lot of damage on board, and sure, it's not as good as a cheat target as Hornet Queen is or whatnot, but the fact that you can just put so much damage that retains itself is really nice.
Yeah.
I don't think it's amazing or anything.
No, it's not amazing. So, but neither is Hornet Queen. Hornet Queen's not a good card anymore, neither.
A very defensive posture. Like, for me, Hornet Queen is a very stabilization card. Like, again, things have hit the fan, right? Like, and you could take over games with Hornet Queen. I mean, it's serviceable, right? If you're still running it, it's perfectly fine. But Yeah, it seems a little late to the party sometimes for me, I guess.
All right, we've spoke about this enough. Me personally, I'm not crazy about either of those cards. Pir and Kiran Nala, kind of a staple for a long time. It's gone. Bergi, God of Storytelling, which is a 2 colorless, 1 red legendary creature. God, when you cast a spell, add 1 red. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end, and creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns. It can also be a 4 and a red for Harmful Horn of Bounty, which allows you to discard a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. It's a legendary artifact. I think Bergi's a great card. Definitely see why it's in here. It's a 3/3 that allows you to keep generating mana. If you've got a lot of cheap spells that you can power out very quickly, especially with ways to reduce the cost of those spells, it can be bonkers. So I don't think we need to go too much into this. I think this is just fine. Burning of Jinye, gone. Caves of Chaos Adventurer, absolutely no questions there. Burning of Jinye, another one of these land destruction cards. I just don't think there's a place for them anymore, at least in your list. Caves of Chaos Adventurer is absolutely bonkers. 5/3 trample gives you the initiative. Super nuts card. Rolling Earthquake is gone for Eidolon of the Great Revel. We got to talk about this.
I like me some Eidolon.
I'll explain.
I think Eidolon is okay. I think in a 540 list, you can probably make space for it, given that I'm assuming that the red aggro package is probably, there's a big support for it. Am I right?
It's that and a little bit different tech. I added Storm. Guess what that does to the Storm player?
What does it do to the Storm player?
Whenever a player casts a spell with converted mana cost 3 or less, Eidolon of Great Revel deals 2 damage to that player. It makes them doubt their decisions.
I am not going to not play a Storm package because of your one.
I'm going
Eidolon.
to try to stop you.
You can try.
This was my tech.
I will wait and get rid of that if I even need to, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see that there's some tech in there for like the anti-Storm package.
Without calling it that, it's really an aggro card, but it was tech. Rolling Earthquake, the reason why I caught that. I'm going to eventually try to work in Banefire. I want some uncounterable X spells. With this type of environment, we've got stuff like Mana Drain and these type cards. Rolling Earthquake's fantastic. Like, I'm in love with this card. X spells, when you invest all that mana and do this thing, they're great for finishers, great for board wipes, but they also run a really big risk of getting mana leaked and etc. Right? I mean, they're just kind of asking for it. You have to really be like play around a lot of these dazes and all that. So it requires like a lot of mental math, and I just kind of wanted to get rid of that.
That's fair. All right. Suspicious Stowaway. Goodbye.
I like that card.
I don't dislike it, but it's kind of seen its time. Malcolm,
like, it didn't see any time. It saw like less than a year.
That's fine. That's all it needed anyway. In for Mind's Desire.
I wanted to be wild and goofy. Explain what Mind's Desire does, please.
Mind's Desire, 4 colorless, 2 black for a sorcery. Shuffle your library, then remove the top of your library from the game. Until end of turn, you may play it as though it were in your hand without paying its mana cost. If it has X in its mana cost, X is 0, of course. Storm.
But this is like a goofy Storm
It's
card.
a wonderful card.
I had to grab onto some goofy Storm. Like,
Cards
I'm a holdout.
Listen, cards like this, I've learnt my lesson over the last few years to never say that card's just never going anywhere, because we've seen cards in the past that I've said that too, right? We could talk about Deathrite Shaman. We were actually talking about a little while ago. That's in the cube. If you'd have asked me 4 or 5 years ago if there's any chance ever that Deathrite Shaman wouldn't be in the vintage cube, I'd be like, you're nuts. We were actually talking about that as being something that you could potentially see cutting at some point, right? Especially with... We've got Modern Horizons 3 probably not far around the corner. Are one of these big, powerful sets going to see the end of cards like that?
Yes.
Mind's Desire, I would argue, is one of those cards that if I were to say that card is very unlikely to see a card be able to replacement for a number of reasons, this is one of those cards. It's a super, super fun card. It's expensive. It's very flashy. It allows you to do all kinds of broken stuff. It can be a total miss, right? Because heaven forbid you go off Storm 6-7 times and then you flip 7 lands off the top of your library. That really is unfortunate. But the ability to make huge plays, make big flashy plays, and make such fun plays, Mind's Desire to me is incredible. I don't think it's leaving the Vintage Cube list anytime soon.
What do you think, May? I think it's flashy. That's why I did it.
Flashy fun cards is a perfectly valid reason to put it in, but can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them draft it.
We got a lot of horses here. They're going to draft it.
I will take this.
It's tech. It's tech.
I will take it.
It's goofy. I will not argue that this is an optimal card because the ideal situation is going to be brain freeze and tendrils.
I will argue that when you're taking out things like Wildfire, which is already kind of like trying to tailor towards people trying to make the weird deck and being like, here's your next weird deck to try to draft into.
I think Mind's Desire is just too stable.
Definitely a more fun decision compared to, say, Wildfire.
Yes.
So.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with that. Because people will do stuff like power out creatures and stuff like that. They'll go for Atraxa. They'll go for Archon. They'll do some weird, like, Cheaty McCheaterson creature nonsense with Storm. This will make, in my mind, an unusual Storm deck where you're not trying to, maybe you didn't get the tendrils. Because I'm at 540, right? Like, we talked about this, you and I just talked about this about right-sizing our cube in the previous episode. When you start getting these bigger cube sizes, it's harder to make Storm packages work. So I have to have a little bit more variety, right? So I have to kind of push it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So in this case, I said, whatever the hell with it. I'm going to do Mind's Desire. Yeah. And if people want to just like crank out some nonsense and get an Emrakul off of this,
and you don't,
or nothing.
You don't need a Storm Cannon of like 15 to make this card super, super powerful or even super fun, right? Even sometimes 2 or 3 of a Storm Cannon, especially if you've got any kind of top of your library manipulation, then this can be very, very powerful. But I think just for fun factor alone, but as well for power, I think this is an absolute, like, just gut shot right in there. Fantastic. Occult Epiphany.
Wait, gut shot's not in this cube.
No, gut shot's not in this.
Well, gut shot was suggested, by the way.
Listen, I love me
it's
some
good.
gut shot.
It's good.
It's a free spell, and I love me some free spells. Occult Epiphany gone. Lorien Revealed in. No brainer there.
That goes back to what we talked about before with the basic land fetch.
Did you put in all the creatures and then not put in Lorien Revealed? Because I don't see the rest of them on this list.
I did not put the green or the white one in there. So I have argued. So I know the triomes make the fetch good, but the creatures for the green and the white one, and I don't know the names of them right now, some kind of int or something like that.
Generous Ends. It's called Generous Ends.
I just don't see ever wanting to reanimate those or do anything other than the fetch, right? So they're literally just taking up spots for the fetch. The other 3, the red, the black, and the blue one, have functional purposes. You know, the blue one drawing cards. The other 2 are actually serviceable creatures that I would want to reanimate.
Yeah.
So that's my argument. I don't want to bring back the white one or the green one. So they kind of just take up slot equity for me, even though I understand that they do get the triomes, they do get my shocks, they do get my duels. I just don't see taking the slot equity for something that does that.
No, I agree with that logic. I think it's very, very sound. And obviously, drawing 3 cards is wonderful, right? Ancestral Recall is only 1 mana, but if you don't have it, sometimes paying 5 mana is not a big deal, right? If you've been able to
Chase's Ingenuity, you're a little bit desperate, but mostly island cycling.
Mostly island cycling.
I'm okay with that. Because all these are mostly going to be land cycling, right?
Yes.
And if I'm going to do it, I want the extra benefit of why the card is doing it to begin with. So that's my argument for not including the white and the green one.
Yep. All right. Aether Channeler, bye-bye. High Tide in. Love this change. High Tide, especially with things like the Underworld Breach combo. But really, anytime you just want to make a big mana play, High Tide is a phenomenal enabler. I don't know if you want to go into this a little bit deeper, but Storm. I just feel like,
Lightning Channeler makes me so sad. It is a pushed version of like 3 different cards, all 3 of which I love for cube environments. And it's just not cutting the mustard.
It's not.
I love Aether Channeler, but just didn't.
I love it so much.
Didn't do what I needed it to do. Not with subtlety and all these cards that come out of there better.
No, exactly. Right. Lightning Helix, goodbye. Zerda the Dawnbreaker. One of these super powerful companion cards. I will say, I think Zerda's nuts. I think all of the companion cards.
You want to read this? This is tech.
Sure. So this is 1 colorless Boros for a legendary creature, Elemental Fox. For that reason alone, it's got to come in.
What did he say?
3/3. What did the fox say?
Mm-hmm. What did Zerda say?
The fox say? Obviously, companion. So the companion condition is each permanent card in your starting deck has an activated ability. Abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce it to less than 1, and then you can pay 1 and tap. Target creature can't block this turn.
So I actually run Kenrith, the Return King. So aside from the fact that this is a great companion, you can do the can't block situation, which is a pretty good little aggro type of deal, like can't block. The reduction of cost for something like Kenrith, because I do actually do that for, Stu and I pre-gamed a little bit when we talked about, it has so much versatility in a powered vintage cube that I was like, whatever, I got an extra Kenrith, I'm going to go ahead and try it out because of the triomes and all these different things I've added. And then having Zerda with that just...
Well, even the combo mana rocks.
It's just cream on top.
I'm definitely not going to argue why this companion doesn't belong in, but man, losing Lightning Helix hurts.
Me too. I love Lightning Helix.
One of my favorite burn spell.
Oh yeah, me too. And I'm going to even go so far as that I actually loved a Johnny that did the Lightning Helix. This is like burn after burn for me, actually. So yeah.
But you can go infinite with this card. You can untap like Basalt Monolith.
You could do some nonsense with this card. Yeah. So it's good. It's tech. I like it. I wanted some interesting tech.
Right, Arbor Elf, goodbye. Not going to lie, I think Arbor Elf's kind of been on the chopping block for a long time. I think this has probably lasted longer than it needed to. Mm-hmm. And Undermountain Adventurer has come in. This is a 3 and a green, 3/4 vigilance initiative.
Anthony learned all about it in the previous episode.
And you can tap it for 2 green, or if you've completed a dungeon, you get to tap it for 6 green mana. I don't know how often that's going to come up. I feel like if you have the initiative and you're smacking someone with a 3/4 and going through the dungeon, you're probably in a pretty good shape either way. But it's another initiative card, and it's nuts, and I love it.
I'm going to blame my good friend Christian, who's sitting here in the corner, kind of like REM right now. Say hello. Hello. Him and his little Yoda and Darth Vader is the reason why I just added the initiative.
Yes.
We talked about that.
Thank you. Yeah. Well done, Christian.
Thank you.
Well done, Christian. Shout out. He's here. He gets to experience the fruits of the spoils. Tangle Wire for LED. Already covered that.
Yep.
Karn Liberated for a currency converter. May, I want to ask you about this. Karn Liberated. Tell me how you feel about this card. Like, from a vintage power level, what do you think? The face kind of says it all.
It's a confusing card to draft.
It's just...
It either does a lot or it does nothing.
Yeah, it's just not great anymore.
Yeah, it's like a bad Meteor Golem-ish kind of thing. Yeah.
And I love Meteor Golem.
Yeah.
Love Meteor Golem. But Karn Liberated for 7 colorless, and you get to exile a card for the +4, or you get to exile a target permanent for the -3, which is fine. The restarting of the game is almost a meme at this point, I think. I don't know how relevant this is, but it really isn't, I think.
This was a staple 5 years ago.
Years ago.
Comfortably.
Yes, years ago.
So I think my problem with Karn is that it represents a problem in current cube design, that there's an opportunity cost. Of when people are drafting and then they see Karn come up, their opportunity to draft other cards that are easier to play, easier to work around, or that just does more is so vast that Karn just can't keep up.
Agreed.
And it's just so difficult to justify his slot in an environment where everything is just so powerful.
I think that is a beautiful summary of not just this card, but of so many cards, especially some of those legacy cards that we're talking about that maybe at one point seemed like staples, and they're just not anymore. And in fact, one card I'm going to bring up, and this was a card that I slammed. I don't know if you remember this one. We had an episode, and I slammed this card, and I talked all kinds of junk about it. And then I kind of, maybe I retracted a little bit, although I still don't really like this card, is Ulvenwald Oddity. And you're not running this card in your cube.
I will.
Right?
I've got it on standby.
I
love it.
Let me tell you, again, as a consumer of content, right? Whatever it may be, Vintage Cube on Twitch, Vintage Cube on YouTube, that is another one of those cards. It's a 4 mana haste creature.
Yep.
It's there's nothing wrong with it, right? Raw power level, I suppose. Maybe. But I don't see it prioritized ever. I never see excited to draft Ulvenwald Oddity. I never see, oh man, there's an Ulvenwald Oddity. I am so excited.
We're bringing back this. It's not exciting.
I'm going to bring it back.
It's just kills people.
It's not. It's not exciting.
Does the thing it needs to do.
It's really expensive. And obviously, Ulvenwald Odyssey is not a great example because that's doing what you want it to. It's coming in at 4 mana. It's attacking as a 4/4 with trample and haste, right?
So
that's doing what you want it to.
Karn was part of that mechanism of like the big green at one point, right? The reason why cards like that existed, and I do still have Ugin in this cube, 4/8, right? The OG Ugin. But Karn kind of fell into that situation where you had to power it out. So you would ramp really fast. It kind of jumped over that Unga Bunga. It was part of that green supplementary type, we'll call it pseudo-tron, where all you try to do is burst, ramp, and get to your big threats, right? And or you would channel it, in. But those type of things, while they do exist, just aren't there anymore in my current suite that I have. They just don't, they're not, it's not even that they're not fast enough. They're just not, frankly, interesting enough. It's got nothing to do with, it's more the dynamics of the type of cards that have been introduced. And players don't want to continue to play the same cards over and over again. So sometimes refreshing these is okay as a curator. Again, I want to go back to the point that I made. Karn Liberated, fine card. If you got it in your cube, keep running it. I'm not telling you to stop. I'm putting it in a binder, which, doesn't really hurt my feelings with this one, but 7 mana.
Put it in a commander deck.
Yeah, not even there. Like, for me, I'm just not going to run it there either. Like, it's not the type of card that I simply want to play any longer.
All right. Skyclave Shade, gone. In Cabal Ritual.
Storm Package. Pretty straightforward.
Very obvious. Forbid is gone.
Don't tell Justin Parnell. Justin, I'm so sorry.
Two blue and a colorless for counter target spell with buyback, and the buyback is discard 2 cards from your hand.
Didn't feel...
No, it's not good enough anymore. There's too many...
Again, don't tell Justin.
First of all, there's too many other really, really good counter spells, especially free ones, and this one's 2 blue and a colorless.
Yeah, it's just kind of getting outrageous.
It's cancel with a little bit of an extra. No, thank you. Turnabout. Let me ask you this. Is Turnabout, or where is the motivation for Turnabout? I think Turnabout's great. I think that with things like, obviously, Tolarian Academy, Gaia's Cradle, Urza Saga, those kind of lands really, really incentivize you to play a card like Turnabout. Obviously, the Storm package, it really helps as well. Was those kind of the primary reasons for you wanting to run Turnabout again?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Tezzeret, the Seeker. Untap 2 target artifacts.
It held out so long.
Just that +1 ability, or the minus to go search for an artifact, that was super bonkers back in the day. But Farewell Caretaker, and this, I'm sorry, Anthony, can you do me a favor?
I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about it.
What does it do? What's that top line? What does it do in ETBs? I can't read it from all the way.
Naivety. Gives naivety.
Initiative. Awesome. 4 colorless and a blue.
It really says a lot that an uncommon 5-drop can generate more value irrelevant to whether or not it's on the board compared to other 5-drops in the same color.
Right.
And I find that absurd.
Yes. You won't like this analog. It also, I won't say we, I won't include you. I think it outclassed Bitter Blossom. It just gets, I know, if you guys can see May's face right now.
I know. Hang on.
Oh my goodness.
Bitter Blossom, my
Still
beloved.
Sitting on my dang desk.
Don't get me wrong, Bitter Blossom doesn't have a place in a lot of current environments, but there's a huge difference between 2 mana and 5 mana.
I can still see a comeback for Bitter Blossom.
They're different roles.
I can see a comeback one day for Bitter Blossom. Yeah. Really, I think it's another one of those pretty unique effects, right? And just being able to churn out, even if it's just a 1/1, even if it's just once a turn, there may be a time where an effect like that is relevant again. I think it has kind of fallen out of favor, but who knows where we're going to be.
I still run it right now, waiting for Modern Masters 3.
It's going to be gone.
It's going to be gone after Modern Masters 3. It's going to happen.
All right. Sorin the Mirthless.
It was a test.
It was never a good card.
It was a test.
In my opinion. For Concealing Curtain. So you get a 1 black for a Defender 0/4. You can transform it for 2 and a black, and it becomes a 3/4 menace. And when it transforms, target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do that, target player or that player discards that card, then draws a card. Very good card. Obviously, information. Obviously, get rid of your best card. To me, makes absolutely perfect sense, and I will say I don't think Sorin ever really deserved a spot in the cube. Consecrated Sphinx, goodbye. Brain Freeze, hello. Sphinx does pain me a little bit because I love the Sphinx, right? But 6 mana for a 4/6. Again, I think even if you just look at the initiative cards, look at Farewell Caretaker, which is 1 mana less. Yes, it's less power. Yes, you're not potentially drawing 2 cards every time your opponent gets a card.
But that value also retains. The big difference between mana costs is that 5 is a lot cheaper than 6.
Sure is.
And
Yeah.
the fact that it doesn't matter if you get rid of the Feywild Duder, you still get the initiative.
That's right.
Versus if they remove Conch Sphinx, you paid 6 mana to basically time walk yourself.
Do nothing, exactly.
Nice.
Yes.
Dice to removal. Sorry about your luck. Soul Transfer, gone. Okay, I'm not going to read that one. It's a Neo
tested
card.
it.
It's fine, but no,
It's
it's not.
medium.
In for Tendrils, or out for Tendrils, I should say. Tendrils of Agony, 2
Storm.
colors, 2 black. Target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Storm. Obviously, just the absolute poster child win condition for Storm. That with the Brain Freeze combo definitely obviously makes sense when you're adding the Storm package. Mimic Vat, goodbye. Helm of Awakening, hello. We talked about this a little bit in the pre-game. Helm of Awakening, I think, is a very fine card. We actually talked about the combo that this has with Mystic Forge and Sensei's Divining Top. You can draw your whole library.
Which I have an extra Mystic Forge.
Which you don't, and you
currently
don't have that
run, but I
currently
can add
in the cube. But I think Helm of Awakening is a more than fine card. It's a great card to be able to put in with Urza as an example, right? Bring it in. Now it also taps for mana, so it's only cost 1 and it's reducing the cost of your spells. I think it's a fine card. I think it has a place in a vintage cube.
I agree.
Next, we have Bribery to Frantic Search. Because we mentioned Bribery earlier getting removed and the reasons behind it. But into Frantic Search is an interesting choice. I do think that being able to just turn through your cards and then refund it to just keep up, I do like it. I don't think that it's going to be an amazing card, but sometimes it's good to just take out some of the gimmicky cards for the more generically playable ones.
This is also bonkers in Reanimate.
And Storm.
And it's very, very good in Storm as well.
Yeah.
Nothing like High Tiding and then Yawgmoth Swelling your High Tide and Frantic Searching and untapping lands that now tap for 3 mana each, your islands. I absolutely...
It's a good blue card.
It's an incredible blue card. I love Frantic Search. I don't know why this wasn't in there. I don't know if you had it in here and took it out at some point and what you took it out for. And if you just took it out because there was no Storm package and you felt that the other benefits from it, like, I don't know, maybe when Urza Saga came in, you would have thought, I'll put Frantic Search in? Question mark?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. We're on the same package.
It goes into a lot of decks. It's great glue for those decks, and sometimes just having a generically good card is just
100%.
Better than a gimmick. So.
Yeah.
I will say this. I was never a big fan of these cleave cards, right? So
Nope.
many, many moons ago, there was a cleave
Worst
ability.
designed card
It's just
in the
so
history
goofy.
of Magic.
It's just so goofy. So cleave basically added brackets around certain text in the card, and if you paid the cleave cost, you removed the bracketed text from the card's ability. I'm not going to even read this because I just don't like it very much. I don't like the whole cleave thing. It's gone. Dreadfugue is gone. And this is one of May's favorites, I think. Question mark, May, you might love this, is Dreams of Steel and Oil. How do you like this one?
I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but I definitely would say that it's up there.
You like I like this card.
May, where do we go
I
if
like
beds
a lot.
are burning?
What?
Dum,
Dum, dum.
How do we sleep when our beds... bit of midnight. Oh, anyway. I like this one, though. I like cards that do multiple things. This is giving you information.
I
you
think
get
it's
to
a good
dump.
switch.
Yeah, I think this is fine.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's just an addition. So another card that I actually cut recently was Languish. Just didn't really see any value in that card anymore with the things like Damnation and Damn and all these cards that have come out as of late. Yawgmoth's Will went in that place.
They're kind of sideboardy as well, is what
They
I'm saying.
are, and it's very like hyper dependent on the -4/-4 with Languish, right?
Agreed.
It's
Yep.
just it's
How
great,
many
but
indestructible
it's
creatures would it even be relevant against compared to Dan?
Exactly.
correct.
Exactly.
There's not a lot of things that are relevant nowadays that have indestructible, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's correct. And or hexproof. Like I've kind of thinned that as much as I could because interaction. Let's go back to the original core of what we're talking about here with powered vintage cubes. Just because it has to be the most powerful cards in Magic doesn't also mean it has to be the most unfun cards in Magic. Going back to the original bribery conversation we had, right? I want people to play this and play powerful Magic, but simultaneously have a great time. If I'm going to run cards that makes it so there's no interaction, then, that kind of calls into question, what's the purpose of the Find the Fun? Just because it's powered vintage doesn't mean it also has to equal not fun. So that would be my little, G.I. Joe.
I like it. All right.
I agree with the change. I think it was a great swap.
Thanks.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. Right. Bloodbraid Elf gone.
Oh, hurts.
It kind of does. I think Bloodbraid Elf was really should have been on the chopping block a long time ago. Manamorphose in. I love Manamorphose. Great Storm card again. Just another really, really good mana fixing card, even if it at its absolute most base level. And it replaces itself. So it's 1 and a Gruul, instant, add 2 mana in any combination, and then draw a card. I think this is a great card. Again, with your Storm package. Incredible. I love it.
Right. Yep.
It's a good change, but it's certainly still going to hurt. I miss the days of Blood Elf.
Bloodbraid has seen better days. Mm-hmm. It's gone.
It has.
Is it
Time
Charm?
to say goodbye.
Is it Charm Goodbye in Expressive Iteration?
I just like the deck selection.
I think it's just straight up
card
better
selection.
Yes.
Moving through your deck, just doing what you want. It's just a better card, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Like, I love the flexibility of Visit Charm, but like, sometimes it's not a matter of we need flexibility as much as we need just card efficiency.
Raw power. Sometimes this is power.
Yep.
This next one's actually a shout out to our friend of the show, Andy Mangold, who recently had this amazing episode that I truly enjoyed, just talking about the hipsters of Thraben Inspector. Andy, I just did this because I had nothing else to add in my defense, but...
Is Thraben Inspector
it's okay.
poster child hipster
It's
card
hipster card, yeah.
of the vintage cube?
He said it. He called it out. He said he got some hate fan mail from it, but like, I don't disagree with his statements. Like, J-Bro, I love you, shout out, but it's a cool card. Like, I love Thraben Inspector, so I added Novice Inspector. My argument, this actually came up in our MTG drafting recently, where someone asked me, like, what's the appeal of Thraben Inspector and cards like that? And my justification was kind of I guess I gave the canned answer, right? Like, it gives you like a long-term game kind of investment where you get a creature on board that you can equip and do things with, so you get immediacy, but then you get card draw value over time. But my other argument was with the addition of stuff like Gut in the Vintage Cube, which I've added, and also in this card's actually running in my Artifact Cube too, that it represents like artifact count. It represents like something that maybe I don't want to draw the card, but I'm okay with sacrificing the Gut, and I'm quite okay with that. Exactly. Or the Bombardiers or the Buccaneers?
Broadside Bombardiers.
Yeah. Same thing, right?
It's redundancy.
It's redundancy.
You can't complain about redundancy.
You don't always have to draw the card off the clue. It can actually just count as a utility piece function or a token that you can use to weaponize.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. So something that I was doing at the behest of Anthony is I have, for the last couple of days, been going onto Cube Cobra and just doing a boatload of drafts just by myself of Anthony's Vintage Cube. And that was something that I tended to lean very heavily towards when the cards were available were those Boros, Inti, Gut, those kind of decks where I was able to just get a bunch of those kind of cards as well as the enabler cards to just get extra artifacts, tokens, creatures, whatever, so I could sack them and discard cards and get a bunch of value. And I will say that those decks look super fun and pretty powerful as well. So I agree. I think a card like that where you're getting... It seems that every permanent is relevant nowadays, right? So that's making what previously might have been just, it's just a food or it's just a clue. And sure, yeah, you can sack it and pay 2 and draw a card. But now you're getting all this extra potential from any kind of permanent, right? It's not just what it says on the tin. It's not just a food that gets you life. It's not just a clue that draws you a card. Now with all these new cards that are coming in, it's representing all these new strategic choices when it comes to deck building. And I think the way that is enriching an environment like this is just making it so much more fun to draft. And I already love it. But again, those kind of cards just really sell the cube like in a huge way for me.
So it ultimately comes down to cube dynamics, right?
Exactly.
Like you're giving your drafters choices to do stuff that's interesting and just like, so hi, my name's Anthony. I think I'm a Thraben hipster, but I actually think the card, because of the secondary component, actually does play into it. So I get Andy's argument, right? Like it's not the best card.
You cannot argue with the man.
It's not an unfair argument.
You cannot argue with the man. At the end of the day, I do think that he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Excuse me.
Nope. He's not.
It does seem, like you say, it is very kind of hipstery, but it doesn't mean that the value isn't there. And I do think that the value is there with these other strategies that exist nowadays. So I like the card. We're going to keep going. EE, Engineered Explosives, goodbye. Memory Jar in. This to me is another one that's crazy. Like, Memory Jar to me should have been a staple forever. I understand from a Storm perspective that you want to put these in. I also understand from a recent shift in the power of any kind of draw 7 with cards like Sheoldred, with cards like Orcish Bowmasters. There's so much power in these draw 7s, and that's another theme that I've really gone hard on when I've done a lot of the testing. Is that style available? Can I get Sheoldred? Can I get Bowmasters? And then can I just power some kind of deck that allows me to enable those kind of cards? But Memory Jar's just bonkers busted. Like, why wasn't this in already? Let me ask you that first of all.
Well, so Sandwich and Chris and I discussed this card on numerous occasions without a Storm package, and before the prevalence of draw 7s, like Hull Breacher was maybe the prevalent card at the time. There wasn't a lot of payoffs, but then Sheoldred came out, and then Orcish Bowmasters, and now we just have like draw 7 decks. Like, Wheel of Fortune has suddenly become like not, I need to reload my hand. It's become, I'm going to draw 7 and kill you. It's weaponized draw 7s.
I agree.
That's a different tone.
I agree, but I think, this being an artifact, it's 5 mana, which is not cheap, but you obviously can put it out. You can dump the rest of your hand, put this out. If your opponent doesn't have a way to get rid of this card, on your next turn, you can just crack this, get an extra grip, dump as much of that as possible. Right? Neither player gets to keep it at the end of the turn. So yeah, maybe if your opponent's playing some kind of control strategy and they've got a bunch of mana open or removal, yeah, it could maybe be a little awkward. But it's nuts. It's Memory Jar. Like, I don't know. I don't understand why this wasn't in there, but I love this card. I'm glad you put it in. And EE, I don't see it in other lists. Me personally, I think I can see EE becoming great again.
It's a token killer.
We're seeing a lot of tokens.
Yeah, it's a token killer.
We're seeing a lot more
ultimately, that's what it is.
up.
And with Domain, it actually has prevalence. So, it's not a bad Magic card.
I agree.
So,
all right, Heirloom Blade. I'm not even going to go through this because it's been cut for Lotus Petal. Heirloom Blade is an equipment, and I think equipment,
it's okay.
Outside of a few of the very obvious
they've gotten more streamlined.
Ones, they are, right? Lotus Petal, for me, absolute no-brainer. Love Lotus Petal.
I don't love Lotus Petal.
I'm gonna
go ahead and tell you that I'm Lotus Petal agnostic. I'm running it because I'm running Storm, but I don't think this is a great Magic card. It just so happens that I have one from Tempest, and it's from my Air Force days, and I put it in there. But I don't think it really ultimately changes the dynamics of Storm. Even you could run it. You could Lurrus it out. You could do goofy stuff with it.
Yeah, I think. Well, there's one. First of all,
Lurrus
being able to replay it with Lurrus is insane. Number two, even if you just want to look at it as a straight up quick acceleration with any mana fixing, is very good as well. Even if you want to look at it as, it's an artifact that I can play for 0, and if I have Urza out, now I don't even have to sacrifice it. I can just tap it for blue mana. I think Lotus Petal is a very, very, very good card. I think any 0 mana fixing like this artifact, that even if you have to sacrifice it, which yes, you do, obviously it's not at the power level of a Mox, but even the fact that you can do that, I think just makes this card very, very powerful.
This is one of these cards that opened up in 1997. It's probably so soaked in Captain Morgan's rum that it's probably not even playable anymore. But what do you think about that card in general?
I'm actually a big fan of it just because 0 mana artifacts are just so easy to take advantage of. And when you have things like Lurrus, Breach, whatever, then there's just so many ways that you could just abuse it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an extra mana for no cost. I know that there's drawbacks that you only get to use it once. Moxen are there, they persist, but I just don't think you can understate the power of being able to get extra mana for free, especially early on. Again, we looked at all these initiative cards. If you have a way to get one of those initiative creatures out very quickly, the amount of extra, initiative card, go get a land. Now there's your land. Yeah, sure, it's in your hand, but now that's that extra card, right, that you might have lost from something like a Lotus Petal, that now you're getting that incremental advantage.
The fact that you can turn 1 drop, say, our next subject, turn 1, you can drop a Talisman, which then you can use that 1 extra mana to drop something else, your actual 1 drop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
That's
it's a
just such a huge play.
That's a great lead-in, actually, a segue, because one of the biggest things that I did is I converted from signets to talisman.
So this actually represents the final grouping of cards. So all the signets are gone, all the talismans are in. I'm a fan.
They represent the immediacy. Like the signets, I observed over the years, and I love signets. They actually hold out. And the one that got the Christmas gift from this subset was Uberbear's Artifact Cube. It's the final cube that actually runs signets. Everything else runs talisman. But in this particular corner case, I just noticed it passed around the table all the time. Like they saw splash play at best, and that having played Chris's 450 pseudo version of my cube, I see that people actually snap grab talisman because they get what they want when they want it. It's the immediacy, right? Talisman require that secondary investment, even though they push you forward. I'm sure some mathematician out there, some audience member could argue about like the statistical ratios of which one gives you more faster over time, right? And I could see where the signets would give you like additional mana over time.
I don't think they do.
But
I don't think they do.
And without the pain cost
They
associated.
still the pain
You're
cost
paying
is the
one
only
life,
thing.
and then you can immediately use that one mana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the signet needs to tap, right, with another mana source. So you're still having to tap the signet and a land. So you're tapping 2 permanents to get that.
Don't get me
mana.
wrong. I love me some signets for a lot of different environments, but the stronger you get, that life cost and effectively pumping aggro by proxy is just a good environmental choice.
Yeah.
And when you can, like I said before, pedal, talisman, and to 1-drop, you just put so much more mana advantage over your opponent so much faster in the game.
One of the experimental ideas that I had considered, May, is that certain guilds want mana at different rates. So what I was thinking, instead of committing 100% to talisman, is that maybe certain subsets, like we'll just say Dimir, would be happier with a signet because it's more of a control mechanism, a little bit more slow build up, and enjoys the splash, opposed to like a fast type of strategy like Boros would want the aggro portion of a talisman. That thought did cross my mind.
Let's say turn 2, you want to play your talisman, but you're afraid that if you do, then your opponent's also going to be able to place, say, they were on the play. They were on the play, and they're about to get to their 3rd land. You need to hold up your 1-mana counterspell in order to deal with them, right? If you play your signet, then you're not able to play your 1-mana counterspells. You'd have to rely on free spells in order to answer it. But if you have a talisman, then you can hold up that mana for a different 1-drop spell.
It's nice to be able to hold up for like a Path to Exile or a Swords to Plowshares.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. The immediacy does matter.
It sure does.
And so it's kind of quickened the pace of this cube a little bit, I think, right? Even at 540 versus a 450 of Samages. And I think I can see the speed has equipped a little better.
Exactly. Look at what we're talking about. Consecrated Sphinx for the initiative creature, for Farewell Caretaker. Consecrated Sphinx is a bananas card, right? You're drawing 2 cards every time your opponent draws one. Feywild Caretaker.
She's not leaving Farewell.
Farewell, that's what I said. Farewell.
Okay.
But at that 1 mana difference, which is gigantic, you're now getting that kind of incremental value, right?
I can see that.
And you're speeding things up so significantly. And also just having that 1 open mana. You've talked about this yourself, right? Anthony, if you ever, any one of us who wants to play with Anthony, and I would fully hope that everyone who's listening would seriously consider come to North Carolina on April 27th, come hang out with us at the Gathering Place and play. One piece of advice I'll give you. Anthony is the commander player who will play a land, and then 5 seconds after he's, ruminated about a play, be like, I haven't played a land this turn, right? I'm going to play a land. And then when he goes to his second main phase, then he's right, okay, now I'm going to play a land. It's like, Anthony, this is turn 1. You have 4 lands in play. Stop cheating. So, yeah, Anthony.
I lose track.
Maybe you just need to put like a coin on top of your
I
land pile
do.
to
It's
remind you that you've already done
ADHD.
that.
It's hard. Magic is hard.
There was a point I was going to make, but I actually think that that's a good enough point to try and get people to come to the Gathering Place on April 27th and come and see if you can see Anthony cheat at Magic the Gathering. It's a fun experience.
You won't, because I'll be actually managing it, helping cheaters. But so come out on April 27th, the Gathering Place. The tickets are actually on sale right now. It'll be included in the show notes for the link to sign up. It will be just the best day of Magic. Like, there'll be raffles, there'll be karaoke, there'll be a bar. I will just be parading around, and I actually ordered today an UberCube playmat for the finalists. Whoever takes the top 8, I want to make sure they get a really sweet copy. And if they so desire, we'll sign it with a gold pin.
I'm well known for my ability to provide prizes as well, so I'm going to check out what I have and maybe add a little something to the prize pool. Many years ago, I held a Christmas bingo at my house and gave a very good friend of mine an all-in-one printer, fax, and photocopier. He didn't own a computer at the time, so as you can tell, he was thrilled to receive a gift like that. But I'm gonna check it out and see what I have. I think it's gonna be a blast. I'm really gonna say this as well. Anyone that's on the East Coast, we're not far away. Reach out to us. We'd love to see you. North Carolina is a much better state than Wisconsin. I'm just kidding. I love you, Wisconsin people.
And let's do some challenges. Well, since we're doing that, like, I already challenged the Madison crew. I already called them out. Let's get the Chicago crew. Yeah. I've been calling people out on Twitter. I'm going to continue that. I'm just going to hey, even though you don't get to play me, you get to play Sue.
I'm just starting the trash talk early.
We're going to start the trash talk.
You got to do it.
All right, so let's go ahead and move over to our socials. I hope this has been a fun episode and that you get to see into the mind of a curator and how I turtle up and argue all of my decisions. But, as you can see, we can change, right? We can be convinced. It may take years in my case.
And just remember,
eventually
everyone,
Anthony gets the initiative.
Very importantly, Flash, the whole ability of Flash has to resolve, right? Before whatever trigger of the creature resolves.
Read the cards, explains the cards.
Read the cards. It will explain the cards. All right. Let's start out with, as always, our wonderful, wonderful Patreons. Keaton Schultz, Lord Justice, Chris Singer, Nicholas LaPointe, Stephen Conafile, Preston, and Sam McKenna. Much love to all of you guys for the continued support. Really means a lot to the channel. And I think, I don't know for sure yet, but I think I'm going to be tapping Anthony up for a new mic stand in the next 6 to 12 months. So maybe I'll sound a little better soon. If you love this show, and we hope that you do, dear listener, we would truly appreciate a 5-star review on your chosen podcast platform. If you want to support the show, you can also use our altersleeves.com affiliate link, altersleeves.com/UberCube. Get 5% off your purchase. You can also use our Inked Gaming affiliate link, which you can get from our Twitter. Go there and get all kinds of cool custom products, dice bags, playmats, mouse pads, anything for your Magic the Gathering experience. You can also find us at Twitter. We are at UberCubeMTGPod. You can also reach us via email. If you've got a long question, you've got an idea for a show, or if you just want to reach out and send us an essay about this episode or a previous episode, you can find us UberCubeMTGPodcast at gmail.com. And as always, please come hang out with us at the Discord. All kinds of cool conversation going on right there. And Anthony.
Deck boast? Your deck boast channel's been going.
Thank you.
It's fire. People have been dropping in there all the time. When they go to the LGS and they do a pre-release, the deck boast. It's been fire.
Microsoft had Windows. Jeff Bezos has Amazon. And I have my deck boast channel.
You have your free deck boast channel.
I'm not going to be a gazillionaire.
Yeah, no, you're not going to the moon anytime soon.
I'm not. But I'm proud of that. That was very cool.
Other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is... Happy cubing!